Scream 7, released in 2026, continues one of horror's most influential slasher franchises, serving as direct sequel to Scream 6 in the long-running series. Directed by Kevin Williamson, the film shifts the spotlight back to Sidney Prescott as a new Ghostface killer targets her teenage daughter, forcing Sidney to confront the legacy of violence that has followed her since Woodsboro. Blending classic franchise callbacks with modern themes like digital identity manipulation, parasocial obsession, and generational trauma, Scream 7 explores whether the Ghostface myth can ever truly die, or if the idea of the killer will always find a new mask.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of So You Like Horror. And for this episode, it wasn't necessarily on the schedule initially when I started looking at 2026, but then I realized, this is a good opportunity to go ahead and catch something while it's hot. So for this episode, I wanted to talk about Scream 7. We're a week off from when it came out. So there's going to be spoilers. And I don't know if I'm even capable of doing an episode that's spoiler free when it comes to anything, to be honest. Like, when folks will ask me not to spoil something, I am automatically going to spoil it. Like, it wasn't a thought in my mind to spoil it beforehand. But the second you say don't spoil it, now I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you know who the killer is, or that Darth Vader is really Luke's father, or, whatever the fuck. So never ask me not to spoil it, because I'm petty. I'm a petty person. So don't do that. Just let me do what I do. But in this case, though, I'm going to spoil the fuck out of it anyway, because that's just what we're here to do. So in this episode, I'm trying to frame the conversation around three central questions that really define how we're going to evaluate Scream 7. First off, does this film feel like a true return to form, or is it something completely different? That's the first question. Second, we're asking, did the decision to bring Stu back, whether literally or, thematically, add meaningful tension to the story? Or does it fracture the established canon that made the original, films prior so powerful? And, maybe the most important one here, I think, is this genuinely the final chapter for Sidney, or just another pause in the story that refuses to die for this broad? So that's kind of what we're going to carry on about for the most part. And I'm going to try to do my best to kind of walk you through the story. I'm not great at storytelling, so I got Wikipedia to help me out a little bit, and even I think the wiki kind of fucked it up some. So whatever. But let's go ahead and get rocking and rolling. Let's go back to Woodsboro, where this all begins. So we're gonna open up with the opening kill, because every Scream movie has an opening kill scene, except for one. There wasn't a death in one of the opening scenes, so that's always neat little trivia, and recent also. So Scream 7 opens with the usual callback energy, basically returning to the opening sequence to Woodsboro and directly confronting one of the franchise's longer running fan theories, and that's the whole Stu Macher survived. Because we do know that now, over the years, as things have come out, the original plan for Scream 3 was that Stu Macher was going to be behind, I guess, a group of individuals that was stalking Sidney. But after the Columbine massacre, that plan had to be scrapped and changed. So for many, many years, people have always kind of assumed, especially when the newer films came out, what started in 2022, and then Scream 6, and now even with 7, that's been one of those things that's kind of been in talks amongst the fan base. So, that's how they kind of, drive us right into this. A stab obsessed true crime fan named Scott drags his girlfriend Madison to Stu's old house after it's been turned into a stab Airbnb type museum, like type of deal. And this just shows a clear commentary on fandom. And I like how over the years with the franchise, what they've done. I mean, obviously the first one is the first one. It's a commentary on the horror genre. Super meta. And then the second one, the sequel, addresses sequels. And then the third one starts talking about franchises. And then the fourth one kind of goes into, the continuation of something. The fifth one then goes into the whole idea of rebooting it all and still kind of keeping things in line with what's going on in the times. And then number 7 was really kind of dialing into the idea that we all know Ghostface is out there. We know that it's a thing. Like when you look at Halloween over the years, after the first one, it's like you got Halloween, it all happens. Halloween 2 is directly after it. And people still aren't hip to Michael Myers. By the time you get to number 4, Michael Myers is kind of a ghost story, but you're still not really hip to it, but you are aware. Number 5 is where now like the townsfolk is there. And then even when you come back to the Legacy sequel with, 2018's Halloween, they now have this thing where we are aware of Michael Myers. You have to find a way to tell this story where everyone is aware of it. How do you keep the story fresh? So with Scream, they kind of were doing the same thing. When you get to 7, like number 7, having an Airbnb for the in-film movie Stab kind of plays to the ideal that how do we keep this fresh? How do we still keep it alive with the idea that people are aware of this? People are aware of the killings every 10 years or so. Something comes up and there's a copycat killer. So having this Airbnb again speaks to a clear commentary on fandom. They're the couple that comes in, well, at least Scott, he's a big fan. Madison, not so much. And there was even kind of a thing, we had this discussion on our Colompton podcast where Scott goes to this thing, he brings his girlfriend and she clearly doesn't want to be there. And he asked, hey, do you want to leave? We can leave. And she was like, no, I'll stay. And we had an interesting conversation on things like that happen, because I know with my wife, we're kind of into similar things, but if she doesn't want to do the thing, she's not going to go do the thing, and I'm not going to force her to do the thing, and vice versa. She's not going to force me to go do the thing if I don't want to do the thing. So we kind of function that way pretty well, and there's nothing wrong with Madison saying, oh, I'll stick around. I mean, she should have probably left when Scott said we can leave, because they ended up getting killed. Like in classic slasher fashion, Ghostface comes out and kills them. And after committing the opening kill, Ghostface sets the house on fire. And I like this because this was kind of the symbolic burning down of the past, and at the same time reigniting it. So when you think about this and the story moving now to Indiana, there's really nothing in Woodsboro left for the Scream franchise to do. You've gotten rid of the Stu Macher house. Sidney doesn't live there anymore. Gail doesn't live there anymore. There's nothing back in Woodsboro. So them burning down the house is kind of like, again, the symbolic burning down, the past and getting rid of it. So like the opening doesn't necessarily change form necessarily as much as it's moving on to a new thing, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that's how we kind of kick things off with Scream 7. And now as we start to move on with the story, we jump right into Sidney's new life. And they're kind of treating horror as a domestic invasion. Again, essentially, because This isn't, new territory for Sidney. So in Scream 7, she's no longer hiding in isolation. And, we saw this in Scream 3 specifically. I mean, in 4, she had the book and everything. So she's now a public figure. So it's, but I think in this one now it is more like, look, the past is the past. I live somewhere else. That shit's done. They like, these cats went up to New York and did the thing. I sat that one out. I'm in Indiana. And Indiana feels like one of those states where, like, you would think, like, you're far away from drama. You're far away from bullshit. But obviously not. Here in her new life, she's rebuilt. Oh, here it is. The note. Pine Grove, Indiana. I don't even know if that's a real place. But if it is, I'm sure it's lovely. It looked lovely in the movie. But here in Indiana, she's married to a police officer, which he was mentioned in number 5 when she's out walking the babies in the stroller. And I think maybe Dewey mentioned Mark. So still kind of keeping the things. But she's married to Mark Evans, and she also runs a small coffee shop and, raising a family. The 2 younger ones, I believe they're twins. And then she has a teenage daughter named Tatum, which, if you know anything about Scream, you know that Tatum was her best friend, played by Rose McGowan, back in the original. So, the name is to honor her best friend. So this is the most grounded and stable that Sidney has, like, felt since Scream 3. Like, domestically, she settled down. She's rooted and intentionally quiet. And as we all know, though, that's not something that's supposed to last for her. So that piece kind of gets disrupted when Ghostface calls her straight up, like, just jumps right into it. And, Sidney just, does the thing, answers it. She's playing along with it. Then she gets a video chat request. And right out the gate, we see Matthew Lillard, a.k.a. Stu Macher, scarred and aged, obviously, to fit the times, to really kind of sell us that Stu is here. Stu is back. Stu is alive. And he's letting Sidney know, like, hey, I'm going after Tatum. And I'm right out here at her school. And in the video chat, he shows her the school, the entrance and everything. So Sidney loses her shit, calls Mark. They're rushing over, heading to the theater, and just kind of cut through it. But Tatum is in theater. She's, a young thespian, if you will, much like her mom in the second one, in the college years. And basically the rehearsal was taking place. You see, like, kind of an earlier exchange with mom and daughter, and the typical teenage angst type stuff that's going on. But she let her know, hey, I'm going to be at rehearsal, and this is where Ghostface is now committing one of the murders. Well, 2 of her classmates are murdered. The one young man working the lights, and then her friend who's being hoisted up and gets sliced and diced, if you will. And obviously Ghostface escapes. So that just lets you know now shit's on. And Sidney's new life is kind of being disrupted, and it kind of gives her this ideal, or it gives you, the viewer, the ideal that she's not able to outrun Woodsboro in her past. So, some of the things that we kind of run into here early on is trauma relocation. The trauma of the past, no matter what it is still there. You can move all you want, but it's there. And there's also this motherhood as vulnerability. Sidney is, being I want to say a protective and responsible mom, but she's also guarded. Tatum points out that Sidney doesn't really talk about any of the stuff in the past. She didn't even know that her mom was in theater in college. So there is this guarded part of her. And she, I think at the time, believes she's protecting Tatum. But later on in the film, she realizes that because she didn't tell her things, this is probably causing more harm and more damage to Tatum. Now, because she wasn't prepared, she didn't know how to handle herself in a situation like this. So it's a weird like line to kind of be on. So you can't really say one side's right and one side's wrong. So later that night, Ghostface, after they basically do kind of this lockdown, it's like, hey, everybody's on curfew type deal, very similar to the first one. Like they do a sweep at the house, the family's home, and they didn't do a very good sweep because I mean, if you're doing a sweep at the house, I mean, your husband's a cop. I mean, you got to check every crevice, including the fucking attic, and that's where Ghostface was hiding. So he lowers himself down from the attic and basically creates chaos within the home. He's holding Tatum at knife point, and Mark, the dad, the husband, attempts to fight him off, but he gets knocked out. Just, I don't know, always get frustrated whenever I see fight scenes in movies, and I don't know, because I've never been in a home invasion situation. But whenever I see fights in movies, it's always silly how I see somebody get thrown against a wall and knocked out, or they fall down and get knocked out. Like, I feel like you need to learn how to fucking properly fall. Do a break fall. Like, and it's not just a jiu-jitsu thing. I mean, wrestling, football, lots of different things. Pro wrestling, like, learn how to fucking fall so you don't crack your skull and go unconscious while a masked knife welding killer is chasing your wife and daughter throughout the house. Fucking Mark, you fucking suck. I mean, he seems like a good dude, but I don't know, dude. Don't get knocked out so easily. But anyhow, he gets knocked out, and Sidney basically, goes into Sidney mode, survival mode, final girl mode, and they have a panic room, which I think is awesome. When Jodie Foster was in that movie Panic Room with Kristen. Is it Kristen Stewart? Yeah, the girl from Twilight. I love that movie. I don't know. I just really, really liked it a lot. So when I saw that they had a panic room, he was like, hell yeah. But, I mean, they could have just kind of hung out there. But nah, Sidney goes in the panic room, and there's a little escape out the back, which I almost feel like it kind of defeats the purpose of a panic room, I think. But she was like, look, I got to go check on your dad. I told Sarah after I got home, I was like, look, if we're ever in a situation like that, don't come check on me. Like, stay safe. Like, don't be the hero. Keep you and the kids safe. Meanwhile, whatever's going on with me, I'm going to let you know now, I'm not going to fucking fall down and hit my head and go unconscious. Like, I'm not saying I would beat Ghostface, but I'm also not just going to fall down and hit my head, because that's wild. So anyhow, like in the trailers, you see the chase scene where Sid and Tatum are in between the walls of the house, and that kind of gets played out here. But Sidney's basically like, look, I'm going to go check on your father, and Tatum's like, I got to come with you. So they're creeping through, and that whole thing plays out. The chase ends when Gail and Mindy and Chad from the twins from the previous two films, they show up and run over Ghostface as a chase is taking place, which this is one of those wild things, because you see Ghostface just got hit by a car and run over, so he's pretty dead, like deader than dead. And it's wild because you're like, oh my god, like fuck. Like in Scream 6, when they did the opening kill and homeboy from Spider-Man takes off the mask and reveals he's a killer, that was a big shock to me. It was like, damn, they're revealing the killer already? That can't be right. And then even with this same deal, they pull the mask off. I was like, damn, they're already unmasking folks. Like, this is early. This is wild. But the dude that was unmasked, Sidney recognized the man from the coffee shop. He was one of the customers that he bought a coffee. His name was Carl, and he was an escaped mental patient. So further investigation revealed a connection at the institution with a John Doe. The supervisor named Marco, he confirmed that when Sidney showed a picture of Stu, it was like, oh yeah, that's John. I was like, who? And it was like, as in John Doe. He showed up here, with no memory, And he kind of goes into a little bit more of the story of John Doe, aka Stu, that I don't quite remember. But either way, he does kind of dig deeper into it. And it's a sellable story. It's like, okay, well, cool. And he became friends with Carl. And so this is how we get our Ghostface. But as we know, with any of these movies, there's rarely ever only one. Only one Scream movie ever had one killer. Like, all of them had at least two. And then number 6 had 3. So, yeah, Carl gets killed, but we know there's others out there. So, I guess technically this one had 3 killers. Spoiler. So, yeah. But Mindy points out that Ghostface's motive is always personal. So the safest move is actually the riskiest one. Gather everybody in one place and see who survives. So, that's kind of one of those things you do in all the movies. You do, like, this has happened in all of them, I believe. I can't remember in the second one. I don't think the second one they did something like this. But the first one, obviously, the party at Stu's house, and the third one, they had the party at one of the cast members' house. The fourth one, the big party at the barn and everything. The fifth one, party again. And then the sixth one, actually, I'm trying to think. Well, everybody was together, like, on a hunt for Ghostface. So it wasn't even so much that they were at a party as much as it was like, hey, we're all together. Let's go hunt this guy who's actually with us right now, all 3 of them. So anyhow, everyone gathers, all the kids at least, gather at the tavern nearby. And Sidney and Gail go off. They have a different plan. They're like, look, we're going to draw Stu out. Because she's been basically explaining, like, look, it's Stu. Stu's back. He's still alive. They're checking the video. And they're like, no, it's not AI. This looks like this is legit. The shadows and everything are, like, legit. And if it is AI, this is really, really fucking good. So Gail and Sidney basically, Sidney says to Gail, like, look, I'm going to give you what you've been asking for 30 years, that interview. So we're going to sit down, do an interview, televised interview, and we're going to bait Stu into revealing himself. Meanwhile, all the kids are at the tavern. And again, it's the classic, look, we're all here. If someone's a killer, it's going to get revealed. But in classic fashion, they all separate. Everybody starts going to do different things. Ben, who is Tatum's boyfriend, they end up going out to his car, and she sees on his laptop a deepfake video of Stu, and that freaks her out. So she hits him. She takes off running, and again, this just kind of furthers the whole, like, everybody starts splitting up and separating. Chloe and Lucas, who are two other friends, they get separated and get killed. Which, Lucas, his death was kind of wild to me, but I'll explain that once we get to the reveal and everything of the killers and stuff. And Mindy and Chad, as usual, they get maimed, and like, it's just a running joke now with Chad. This dude gets, like, sliced up and stabbed up, and each time it looks like he's a goner, and each time he survives. So, kudos to Cuban Gooding Jr. Senior's junior son, whatever his name is. I think it's Mason Gooding. So I don't know young actors' names, and it's not me being ignorant or disrespectful. It's just fucking too much content, too many people to remember. So anyhow, but yeah, so everyone's kind of scattered now and running about. Ghostface is fucking around chasing Tatum. Ben comes to. He tries to help, but he gets killed. So see you later, Ben. So obviously it wasn't the boyfriend. It wasn't the boyfriend's friend, who looked like a prime suspect because he was creepy and weird. He even got upset. Lucas, that is, got upset. He was getting annoyed with being called the weird kid. But it's like, dude, you fit weird. I mean, even on Gen V, you're the fucking weird kid. Like, just accept your legacy. You're weird. And it's okay. I'm weird too. So whatever. So, Tatum is, on the run, and she gets a call from Sidney, because after Sidney does an interview and they're trying to get Stu to call, nothing comes about. I believe Tatum runs to the coffee shop, and Sidney sees that, hey, the shop has been opened. The alarm has been disabled. So she ends up realizing that it's Tatum who's in there, and she tells Tatum, hey, look, they're on the phone at this point. There's a gun in the office. Go get that shit. Like, get the gun and just start blasting. So she just does that. She gets the gun. She guides her as she could see the cameras on her phone where Tatum can't see. And she directs her to shoot right past the calendar, and boom, hits Ghostface. And we all know, all of them, except for the first one, I believe, and the second one, they're wearing bulletproof vests. So Ghostface gets clocked, falls down, and Sidney's like, yo, you got to pop that dude in the head. You can't just be shooting motherfuckers in the chest and thinking that shit is all sweet. You got to shoot him in the face. And she goes to do it and doesn't. So, yeah. Oh yeah, that's what it was. They think there's a second Ghostface. That's what it was. The other Ghostface came about, and then the first Ghostface that was down bounces. So yeah, basically a lot of bullshit, a lot of chaos, and now you see that there are two rocking and rolling. Whereas before you thought, okay, well, they killed Carl, so there must only be one Ghostface left. It wasn't. There's two. There's another one. So in the film's final act, the everything kind of escalates into something that felt more personal and psychologically cruel, as Stu calls Sidney to reveal that hey, we've got Tatum, and then he ends up hijacking the television, and at the house, I guess it is, and basically popping up on all the screens and popping up digitally as different killers from the past, whether it be Billy's mom, Mrs. Loomis, or Roman, or like even Dewey at one point. So, and I remember when they were revealing the cast and they were mentioning all these different names popping up. They're like, oh, the dude who played Roman's going to be there. Dewey's going to be there. Matthew Lillard's going to be there. And I was like, okay, this broad's just going to be hallucinating and seeing all these dead people. And no, they use deepfake, a lot of deepfake videos. And I like that, they kept with doing the thing that they do. They find, whatever's going on in the world and kind of incorporate it into the movie to really kind of give you that meta feel of like, again, this shit could happen in real life. This could be going on. So them kind of doing this and fucking with her, it's forcing Sidney to relive the history as he, is promising to recreate the original Woodsboro trauma and all the bullshit that came with it. So making her watch her loved ones, being held captive at home while also tormenting her with these fucking videos, it's infuriating. So, after a violent chase, that leaves many injured and dead. Finally, we get back to the house, and the unmasking reveals the conspiracy of it all. That Marco, the, I guess, manager over there at the insane asylum, used to work at Google. He's super tech savvy, and he engineered the deepfake Stu, while Sidney's neighbor Jessica, who was played by, what was the young lady? She was in True Blood. I don't know. I always remember her name, then I forget her name. But she masterminded all. Like she orchestrated the killings after becoming obsessed with with Sidney's book. I believe it's called "Coming Out of the Dark" or "Out of the Dark" or something like that. Gloria Estefan song, like "Coming Out of the Dark." That that shit. Like, yeah, it was after like all those like 1, 2, 3, 4. All that bullshit that she was doing, and then she started like trying to go with like ballads. It was wild. Sorry, like I guess that's where my kid gets it. It's fucking random fucking tangents. So anyhow, yeah, the neighbor orchestrated all of this because she was obsessed with Sidney's autobiography. And she was basically convinced that trauma created Sidney's strength, and it helped Jessica get out of an abusive relationship, and she murdered her husband. And this is where it gets wild, because Lucas, like, was her son. Like, they killed her son, and that's why I was tripping out about. I was like, yo, what the fuck is going on here? What? I don't know. It was goofy. But she was basically doing this under the belief that she could forge Tatum into the next final girl through manufactured suffering and recreating all of this shit and forcing her to witness this and fight through. So yeah, like it's kind of silly. Feels a little half-baked if you ask me, but whatever. But while the neighbor, Jessica and Marco, they're explaining all of the shit, because, like a Bond villain, we're going to tell you our plot and everything. While they're explaining, Mark, who had been gutted up in the garage earlier, somehow survived, and then he was wrapped in plastic and preserved. I guess that's how that works. They drag his body out in front of Tatum and drop him there. And he is now able to, he has, a blade, so he's cutting the tape that's around Tatum's feet, and that frees her, and she's able to, make her disruption and help Sidney as Sidney kills Marco, and then they become a tandem, Sidney and Tatum tandem, and ultimately shoot Jessica in the face, like a lot. Like, I think they shot her in the body, and it was like, okay, we're not sure, so then they end up just shooting her in the face just to make sure. And they were playing with the idea, I guess Jessica was playing with the ideal that trauma is Tatum's destiny. And the girls were like, nah, not today. So the aftermath restores a sense of unity, and Sidney thanks Gail, because at some point she was basically saying she don't trust nobody, and then she says to Gail, no, I do trust you. Because there was a point where I thought it was Gail. Gail was doing some like real suspect stuff, and I was like, I just feel like it's Gail. Is it like either Gail's the killer or Gail's got to die, and neither happened, and that kind of bugged me. But yeah, Sidney thanks her, and she explains to Tatum, the whole, namesake and everything. Like, she explained it earlier, and Tatum kind of took it as like, oh, you named me after some dead girl. And she's like, no, I named you after a strong woman. And Mindy delivers an impromptu news report, kind of stepping into the Gail Weathers role, and ultimately closing the chapter. Not with meta commentary, but with survival, with like a survivor's reclaiming on the survivor's terms. So that's kind of like a rundown of the movie itself. Now, in the film, it initially kind of hits you with that shock when you get Stu Macher on that video call early on. Because, like I said, when you see it, it's like, God damn, they're doing it like this early. They're revealing it this early. Like, we're not even like 20 minutes in. We were already getting Stu. So, again, this is kind of, to a degree, confirming a long-running fan theory that he survived. However, like we said, the reveal is later kind of like turned on its head. The first Ghostface that was unmasked was Carl, an escaped patient from a nearby mental institution, and the Stu that was terrorizing Sidney ultimately was something that was fabricated by Marco using his Google knowledge, because he worked for Google, he said. So his deepfake technology, and engineered a manipulated version of Stu, along with other legacy Ghostface killers. And for the like first time in the franchise, Ghostface isn't like it's not just a person in itself, but it's a digitally reconstructed, deepfake. It's something weaponized through, AI, and Marco's ability to do that. And, identity distortion becomes a thing, and you see him morph into, past figures. And again, I thought it was all very creative. I think some might argue and say, oh, it was cheap and whatever. I don't know. I don't take these things too serious. Ultimately, when we watch these movies, any horror movie really, it's for funsies. It's for shits and giggles. And, when you overanalyze it to the point of like, it's not enjoyable because, something feels like, oh, too predictable, too lazy, or whatever it might be. It's like, you know what? Whatever, dude. Like let it go. But yeah, like Ghostface isn't even like just a physical thing now. It is something that Sidney can't escape anymore because it's become like part of the algorithm, I guess, if you will. The horror is technological and psychological. So instead of commenting on horror rules like they normally do in so many other films, this film kind of pivots towards media manipulation and digital resurrection, suggesting that in the modern era, identity itself can be weaponized. And the question now becomes, is this the most contemporary evolution of the Scream concept, or does it lean too heavy into the tech side of it at the expense of, our classic suspense that we're so used to getting? I also think that along with the twist of revealing Jessica, the neighbor, as one of the Ghostface, and also Marco, obviously we don't want to discount him because it was his work that brought this all to life. The big thing here, though, we can't lose sight of is this isn't just about proximity. It's about obsession. Like, the killer isn't only someone near you. It's someone who's been watching you and analyzing you and trying to recreate those circumstances that made you who you are. So, Jessica's motive is pretty fucking disturbing. Like, one of the more disturbing ones in the franchise. Like, she's genuinely she believes Sidney became strong because she survived trauma and killed the people who tried to destroy her. And in Jessica's mind, suffering isn't something to escape. It's something that creates the power. So her plan is to force Sidney's daughter through that same cycle and essentially trying to manufacture a new, just kind of making it all this new generation of Final Girl by recreating the kind of trauma that defines Sidney's life. And that's what makes her ideology stand out compared to past killers. Like, Jill in Scream 4 was chasing fame, and Richie was obsessed with preserving the purity of a horror franchise. Jessica's, she's doing something different. She's trying to become like she's not trying to become the Final Girl, but she's trying to create a Final Girl. And that's kind of fucked up. Like, when you really look at it, like, that shit's dark. Like, on so many levels that you're just like, yo, what? Like, but there are people out there like that. Like, people is wild. People are wild. So, that's kind of your viewpoint on the neighbor. Now, with Tatum stepping into things, she clearly isn't like, well, at least you're kind of seeing it at one point. Like, she's not there. She didn't feel like she was there. Like they were trying to position her as the next Final Girl. She shoots, she fights back, and more importantly, she survives. So, I mean, she's got, the earmarks there. But like Sidney had mentioned earlier on, Like, I didn't prepare her. I kind of shielded her from all this. And I don't know, like kind of the passing of the torch thing that I think people were believing would happen here or hoping would happen here, it kind of falls short. Like, and I was talking with a friend about this, and we were both kind of like, you not really passing the torch because Sidney didn't die, and she didn't like quit. She didn't retire. She didn't, stop being Sidney Prescott. She is still there. So this isn't so much about passing of the torch as much as it's like, she's right there in the middle of the chaos, fighting alongside her daughter. So rather than giving us a clean generational handoff, like we seen them hint at in the previous films, the movie leans into something a little different. It leans into this shared survival. Like, it's less about replacing Sidney and more about sharing that trauma and the resilience and showing that it can exist across generations. So the question, that we have here is whether that feels satisfying or if it comes across like the franchise still isn't quite ready to let Sidney go. Like, can Scream be Scream without Sidney? And we've seen it. We've seen 2 movies where Sidney isn't the main focal point. I mean, in Scream 2022, she's there, but you have the Carpenter sisters that were carrying the franchise. And then in the number 6, again, it's back to the Carpenter sisters without Sidney at all. Now you do have Gail there, but that's again not about her. It's just again about the Carpenter sisters. So Scream can survive without Sidney Prescott, I believe. And maybe that's coming in Scream 8. Kevin Williamson said that Nev Campbell pitched a really good idea. So if this does well, which it sounds like it's doing well financially, at least, I don't know, the scores, the critics and what have you, it's kind of split, it seems like. So I always feel like if you are going to see a Scream movie, you're a Scream fan. Like, you're not just picking up Scream 7 as a first time go around and you haven't seen any of the other ones. If you're going to see it, you've seen the other ones. I think I've seen all of them in theater except for 1 and 4. We had a bootleg copy of number 1 and we played that video until the shit broke. And in number 4, I don't remember what was going on in my life and in the world when that came out. I think I was going through a lot of personal stuff, and movies weren't really, normally movies kind of bring me out of a dark place, but this was a time where I think I was very, very much in a spiral. But either way, I've seen all of them in theater except for those 2. So yeah, I feel like if you've gone to see, if you went to see number 7, chances are it's because you were a fan. And any of the critics and what have you, like I always say about critics, I'm not worried about what their scores are. Their score doesn't make or break a film. I think if you let the critics determine whether you like something or not, then you're a fucking loser. That's from the heart. That's facts. All right, sorry, another tangent, and just pour my heart out there because I can. So one of the more interesting parts of discussing this film is that conversation around canon and controversy. Like, the film makes a bold choice by leaning into that fan theory with Stu. And I believe Kevin Williamson said that they had a different ending filmed, or I think they had another direction where Stu actually is Ghostface. Like, it's legit. But they felt like this was just a better direction to go. So, you play with that theory, and you kind of try to figure out like what's the benefit there, and does it make sense? Because as far as we know, he was dead. But like many who believe that he wasn't. It was like, well, look, we never saw a body. And they even kind of play with it in the story. They said, hey, there's no coroner intake notes. So, it left a lot of room to play with there. And who knows? It still could be played with. I mean, they did say, no, Stu's dead. He's buried. But there's still no full confirmation. But anyhow, playing with the idea that Stu may have survived the events from the first film, and whether that reveal strengthens the mythology or undermines the original film is something I think people are kind of debating. And there are also, some timeline questions, particularly around Sidney's daughter and how her age lines up with Sidney's life across the previous movies. And I don't know, the tone of this installment feels a little different from earlier entries in the franchise. I don't think it's too different, but there was a weird shift. So, instead of having a lot of heavy leanings into the meta commentary, the movie kind of plays more like a psychological thriller centered on family trauma and legacy, which makes it, I don't know, like one of the least self-aware films in the franchise, and one of the more emotionally driven movies, I would say. I think, this one might, like, after number 3, because number 3 dealt a lot with Sidney, and then, the half brother, and then, I guess maybe not half brother, but, the brother, and then, the haunting of the mom. So there's a lot of emotional there. But this one, I felt like, now as a parent and protecting your child, that emotional drive is a whole lot different, so that's something that I think kind of shifts the tone a little bit in this recent version. So in the end, Scream 7 has some things working for it, in its favor. Obviously bringing Sidney back as kind of the center of the story. That's the big one. That alone gives the film the emotional weight that the last couple films didn't always have. And that's not to say that the other films didn't have it, their moments and its strength as well. But again, when Sidney's kind of the focal point, when she's the center, it just takes a different turn. There's a different beast there. Like, also playing with the ideal of deepfakes and weaponizing digital identity. That's an interesting twist. And like, the franchise has always kind of played with what's modern. So it's not anything new. So, but it's definitely interesting. That's the route they went, because it does tap into how technology can distort reality and keep past horrors alive. And, when the movie finally reaches, the climax, the final act is pretty intense, pretty brutal. Like, I think 6 was the goriest one for the most part, but this one was pretty brutal. In a way that feels like it might be the most brutal one in terms of like the bloodshed when I'm thinking about it. I'd have to, and it was funny. It's like, I've been watching all of the movies like for bedtime this week, so you'd think I would have like paid attention to that, but I guess I wasn't really. So whatever. Like, don't judge me, judge your mama. But anyhow, yeah, like the brutality of it, I felt like was pretty up there, and I like it. I'm fine with that. So, you have that. Now, at the same time, there are a few things that don't seem to land as well. I think them revealing Stu was good. I think it was neat to play with that. I think revealing it kind of early kind of messed with it a little bit. I guess maybe not, because when you're doing the deep fake stuff and it turns out it was some other randos doing the killing, maybe that did play into the mystery of it. Just kind of throwing everything off. because giving a mystery like that away so early kind of drives these movies. I was just talking to a teammate about that, and we were talking about Scream as a horror movie, because I always have to have these conversations with people who they say they like horror movies, and it's like, well, what do you like? And they like slashers, or they like monster films. So then they can't really wrap their brains around other stuff being horrors, and like, well, Scream's not really a horror. And I was like, well, I mean, it is, and I mean, it's also kind of a whodunit as well. It's a suspense thriller. It's all these things. But, revealing Stu that early kind of, at least before you realize the deep fake stuff, it kind of plays this thing of like, oh man, they didn't already ruined it. So how do we get here though? How do we get to this part? So maybe that's not so bad of a thing, I guess. I don't know. I will say that the motive, the obsession angle, is dark and it's sinister, but it still felt a little undercooked. Like, usually, I guess, let's see. Yeah, I mean, 2022 Scream was the only one where it wasn't like close to home or from the past. It was just obsessed fans. And the real connection to the past was Amber lived in the Macher house, and in the boyfriend, I can't remember his name now. Was it Charlie? He seems like a Charlie. Like, it is fucked up because the fucking movie's on in the background right now. I'm an asshole. Anyhow, like the connection was like to the past was like Amber living in Stu's old house, and then like the boyfriend dating Billy Loomis's illegitimate child. But that's still not like all the other ones where the past was something that was deeply ingrained. So with this kind of reveal and motive and everything, I guess it plays into that a little bit, but it still just felt a little undercooked to me. I don't know. And on top of that, the Carl Gibbs Ghostface fake out feels more like a narrative detour than a meaningful twist. So yeah, like the film had some strong ideals and moments. It also struggled a bit with pacing and payoffs at certain points. So I don't know. It's just my take on it though. I still enjoyed the fuck out of the movie. Like, when people ask like, oh, how did you like it? Like, my exact response is, it's a Scream movie. So then that's what I said about Final Destination after seeing Bloodlines. Like, oh, how'd you like it? What'd you think of it? It's a Final Destination movie. So the things that you've known the other movies to do, it did those things. Were they able to do those things in a way that was enjoyable for today's showing? Yeah, I would say so. I would say that, this version of Scream did all the same things. It gives you the murder mystery and the twists and turns. So there you have it. Just again to go over some of the other major themes of the movie. Generational trauma. That's very, very, very like in your face. Just as Sidney's going through the stuff, and then now she's going through the stuff, and her kid is going through it, and then also name her daughter after her friend who was murdered by Ghostface. So that's something that still kind of symbolizes unresolved grief and hangs on. The construction of the final girl. Jessica's ideology is that Tatum is the next line here. She's transformative, and killing the tormentors creates empowerment. A final girl in Jessica's mind is something that can be manufactured through suffering. So that's kind of a weaker theme, I guess, but it's still thematically there. Manipulation, identity manipulation in this current digital age. So we obviously see, as I've mentioned time and time again, the deepfake technology being used. That's huge in your face theme there. Obsession and fixation. Again, back to Jessica, and her motivation is driven by reading Sidney's autobiography, studying Sidney's trauma, wanting to replicate Sidney's transformation. This reflects a lot of the modern true crime culture and fandom as well. You know, just like the killers in Scream 4, they wanted fame. Jessica wanted like meaning through imitation, I guess you could say. So the movie quietly critiques how survivors can be turned into mythic figures, you know, through society, by society. And that this weird. I listened to a podcast called Sisters Who Kill, and it talks about a lot of black women who've killed. And when you hear some of these stories, it's like it is, you do kind of feel like you're getting to know these people. You're hearing the ins and outs of things. So true crime stuff gets a little weird. Another theme is the persistence of evil. Like, that concept expands even further here. Like, the first Ghostface is a mental patient manipulated into killing. You know, Stu being fabricated through technology. And then again, Jessica's whole fucking wacky motive. That's just fucking bananas. Motherhood, as I mentioned earlier, and control of the narrative is also. That's Jessica just fucking being bonkers. You know, we gotta keep our eyes on people named Jessica. Just a little, you know, just be careful out there. If you know anybody named Jessica, watch your back. So, how these themes fit into the franchise, like when you look at like the other movies, you know, you got the first Scream, the core theme was slasher movie rules and genre awareness. The second Scream was sequels and escalation. The third one was Hollywood and franchise filmmaking. The fourth one was internet fame and viral celebrity. The fifth one was toxic fandom and requels. I fucking hate that word. And number 6 was legacy obsession and franchise nostalgia. And then number 7, legacy trauma, identity manipulation, and generational horror. So in short, this movie moves the series away from satire and toward a darker ideal that surviving horror doesn't end the story. It creates a legacy that others might study, imitate, or even exploit. So, you know, there you have it on my thoughts on Scream 7. And then as far as like ranking them, I guess I can't remember how I last ranked them, but like when I was looking through it, I was like, okay, like how did I like what film? Obviously the original from 96, 30 years ago, it's untouchable. Like it's number 1 for me. Scream 2, strong sequel. Even though it was mocking sequels and saying sequels suck, I thought that this sequel was a pretty strong one, a pretty good one. Now, for my third one, I actually really enjoyed Scream of 2022. It was fresh, but familiar. So, I fucks with it. Scream 6, it was chaotic, but it was ambitious. Going to New York, it had a lot going on. It felt bigger. It felt like the stakes were bigger. And I actually really fucking enjoyed it. My fifth one would be Scream 4. I felt like it was a little too early in terms of like the internet fame. I feel like if that movie came out 2 years later, that shit would have hit. And it'd be fucking great. Like even watching it the other night, as for whatever reason, I just can never really get into it. And I've watched that movie so many times, but not watched it at the same time. And then number 6 for me was this most recent one, Scream 7. It was bold for sure with what it was trying to do. And then Scream 3 is my least favorite out of the 7. But the thing is too, I still enjoy it when I watch it. I think it was, and maybe that was the whole thing was that it was just too meta for what was going on. And that was probably the point. But ultimately, That's my ranking. It's 1, 2, 5, 6, 4, 7, 3. So there, in case you were wondering. You probably weren't, but whatever. So yeah, the original Scream, ask us what the rules were. The sequel asks us who controls the story. But Scream 7 asks us something darker. What happens when the story actually controls you. So there. Those are my final words. Let's roll this bitch out. So as always, thank you to you guys, the listeners. We appreciate you. And if you got any questions, concerns, criticisms, always feel free to reach out to me. You can always find me at So You Like Horror on Instagram. All the words separated by underscores. Or you can email me. Please don't, but you could. I just prefer that you don't. At So You Like Horror at gmail.com. And if you want to be a guest, let me know. I've a couple folks who listened first, and now they sit here and do episodes with me. Talk about you, Scott. Talk about you, Manuel. So if you want to talk about a topic, let me know. If you got a movie, you're like, hey man, I think these cats can probably do a fun episode. Let us know. Phil, Joe, and I will sit down and we'll review your movie and talk about Christina Aguilera while doing it. And have a good time. It'll be fun. But otherwise, yeah, we're around. And we always respond. Well, when I say we, it's me. Because I'm the only one that's running this shit. Skeleton crew over in this motherfucker. But otherwise, thank you, everybody. We appreciate the hell out of you. You guys know what it is. You all keep listening. We're going to definitely keep making these shows. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
I think that's good for now.
The end.